Twilight Gets a Puppy. By TDR. Chapter 17. Friendship is Puppies. Part 1. Once upon a time, in the magical land of Equestria, there were two regal sisters, who ruled together and created harmony for all the land. To do this, the eldest used her unicorn powers to raise the sun at dawn. The younger brought out the moon to begin the night. Thus the two sisters maintained balance in their kingdom for their subjects, all the different types of ponies. But as time went on, the younger sister became resentful. The ponies relished and played in the day her elder sister brought forth, but shunned and slept through her beautiful night. One fateful day the younger alicorn refused to lower the moon to make way for the dawn. The elder sister tried to reason with her, but the bitterness in the young one's heart turned her into a wicked mare of darkness, Nightmare Moon. She vowed that she would shroud the land in eternal night. Reluctantly the elder sister harnessed the most powerful magic known to ponydom, the elements of harmony. Using the magic of the elements of harmony, she defeated her younger sister and banished her permanently in the moon. The elder sister took on responsibility for both sun and moon. And harmony has been maintained in Equestria ever since. Twilight concluded, looking at the book more closely. The young lavender-furred mare shifted on the grass where she laid under a tree on a small blanket so as not to damage the book she was reading by setting it on the bare grass. Her lavender fur was nearly groomed and her purple hair with a magenta stripe had been allowed to grow until it spilled over her back, curling slightly at the end. It was a bit more time-consuming than a shorter mane style she had wore while younger, but she wasn't deaf to the compliments her longer hair brought her while she was still dating. The filly had filled out well as she turned into a mare, enough that even after the flood of suitors that came after Prince simply due to her sudden popularity, she had a number of young stallions who attempted to woo her with little success. She had been on other dates, though after the first few were uninteresting and a particularly pushy one was teleported into the deep snow at the top of the Manterhorn above Canterlot, she started turning all of them down in favor of focusing on her studies. Twilight tapped the last page of the book again curiously, looking at the drawing of the elements. Elements of harmony. I know I've heard of those before. But where? Cue the music. Twilight moved down the path, lost in her own world as she considered where she had read about those before. She had only picked that particular book because she didn't recall having read it yet. It must have been from one of the ones Princess Celestia had given her when she moved into the tower. It was decidedly an interesting read, but it was obviously written as an old pony tale. She would have disregarded it when she was younger, but she had since learned that many of the old pony tales had a few grains of truth in them. This one was sticking with her harder than usual for some reason, and she knew she would need to find out where she had seen the reference to the elements of harmony before, or she would go crazy. There you are, Twilight. Twilight stopped dead in her tracks, blinking in confusion as her brain came back into focus now that it had to work on more than just putting her hooves down in a manner conducive to walking. Lemon Hearts, Minute, and Twinkle Shine stood before her, all three carrying wrapped gifts. Twilight's brain quickly rolled through her mental checklist to try and figure out who the gifts might be for. Her mind clicked onto Moon Dancer. Moon Dancer is having a little get-together in the West Castle courtyard. Wanna come? Twinkle Shine grinned, as did the other two. Even if her own mind hadn't been blaring warning bells already, those smiles would have set it off. Ooh, sorry girls. But you know how I feel about birthday parties. Besides, I've got a lot of studying to catch up on, Twilight muttered before darting off in another direction at full gallop. The trio looked after her and sighed. There is decidedly something wrong with that mare. Lemon Hearts stated. I didn't realize that birthday parties were a real phobia, Minute commented. It's called frigopanophobia. Twinkle Shine explained. It's a real thing with her, according to Spike and Ross anyway. At least those two said they were coming. Minute smiled. I guess trying to convince her it was just a regular party wasn't gonna work. I wonder how she knew it was a birthday party. Lemon Hearts considered. The other two pondered that as well, completely oblivious to the gifts on all their backs. Asterisk. Twilight raced back to her tower, nodding a little as she passed Lyra and Shining Lights, who waved at her. Racing up the stairs, she flung open the door, only for the door to hit something unyielding and bounce back, smacking her in the face and nearly knocking her back down the stairs. Twilight sat down hard, rubbing her nose as the door opened up and a large navy-furred figure glared down at her with amber eyes, rubbing his shoulder with a paw. "Woof!" Ross growled. The moon dog had grown a little taller in the last 2 years. He was at the point that if he stood on his back legs he could look Princess Celestia in the eyes, and like Celestia he towered above every other pony. On all fours he was at eye level with Twilight, and his build made him seem more the size of a particularly burly stallion. The lankiness of his teen years was still present, but he had filled out enough that unless someone had not ever seen a diamond dog they wouldn't confuse him with one. His features had taken on a bit more feline aspect with his face, and unlike normal diamond dogs his back legs, while digitigrade, were not tiny compared to the rest of him. He was well muscled, more so now than before, but it was lean rather than bulk. All 4 of his paws were more cat-like and the front 2 were capable of finer manipulation unless his claws were out. His ears and tail remained feline-like, though his ears had gotten longer to the point Spike had joked he was part rabbit. The glowing balls of light at the end of his tail and ear tips had not brightened any, nor had they gotten any bigger or changed, and most ponies never even noticed them. He still wore pants, less because of fear now and more from utility of all the pockets he had in them. While at home he usually only wore the pants, though he had a long coat that he had worn in a Western-style play that he had loved to the point that Broadway had given it to him. He wore the duster pretty much everywhere from that point on. Miss Broadway had hired him on at the Celestial Theatre a year ago to do odd jobs around the place, much as she had done with Shirley. Her former permanent worker had made a name for himself and quit working at the theatre, which allowed Ross to step in. Ross had considered the Royal Guard at one point, though the recruiter wasn't willing to sign in a diamond dog. Celestia wasn't happy with the why, which was complete political fluff, but she gave Ross a number of alternate ideas he was considering. "Sorry, I didn't see you there," Twilight apologized. "That's because it's a door, not a window." Spike chimed up from behind Ross, the little dragon carrying a gaudily wrapped present as well. Spike had not changed much at all, aside to grow a bit taller and become nearly as smart as Twilight. He was still a pudgy little purple dragon, but what he lacked in size he had more than made up in snark. Twilight blamed his older brothers for that. Particularly Ross, given the fact that no one but Spike and Twilight were able to understand him when he spoke normally. Ross didn't bother with stifling any smart-ass comment that came to mind. Over the years that had an effect on her little brother, as his sarcasm filter was skewed beyond repair. At least Spike hadn't picked up any swearing. Ross could be rude, but he still had the sense to watch his language around Spike. "Bark?" Ross asked as his ears perked up. "The fire? Oh right. Spike, find me that old copy of Predictions and Prophecies." Twilight ordered, getting a stare from the brothers as she raced past them, looking over the bookshelves filling their home. Twilight turned to them, noting that both of them were carrying presents. "What are those for?" "Gifts for Moon Dancer." Spike sighed. "Oh Spike, you know we don't have time for that sort of thing." Twilight chided, looking through a stack of books. "But we're on a break." Spike protested. "Woof." Ross countered. "My schedule? What about my schedule?" Twilight demanded. Ross held up two claws. "Woof. What? When did I free up 2 hours for a party?" Twilight demanded. "When Celestia cancelled all classes for this week. Which means you can at least go say happy birthday to Moon Dancer, before you come back here and bury your nose in a book again. She really wants you to come, even if only for a little bit." Spike grumbled. His eyes narrowed into a glare to meet Twilight's. "Oh no you don't, out of everyone else around here we know what your issue is, and you're never gonna get over that if you keep hiding from it." "I don't have time for that, I need to find that book." Twilight fussed, and both Spike and Ross rolled their eyes. Her horn lit up and she started pulling books off the shelf, looking at them with a growing scowl. No, 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 no. Spike. Don't yell at me. I might have agreed to be your assistant for an allowance, but I'm not some slave to be ordered around. Spike growled. And for the record, this is the third time I've had to say that. One more and I should set the library on fire, just as a obvious I quit statement that even you would understand. Ross took that moment to step between them before things became too heated between the siblings. He was far from the voice of reason, but every so often an argument would break out between two of the three of them. It happened with siblings, and it was agreed that the third would step in to stop it before things could get particularly bad. Celestia had found out once what particularly bad meant when the three of them were mad at each other for some little thing or another. The entire classroom had to be rebuilt after a fire-breathing dragon, a magic immune bundle of sharp teeth and claws that was empowered by magic, and an overachieving incredibly gifted unicorn mage, got into a fight. Twilight's spells could do nothing directly to Ross, and Spike was highly resistant to most forms of damage. Ross's claws and teeth were not sharp or hard enough to do anything to Spike, and he couldn't bite through any shield Twilight put up. Spike's fire was easily blocked by Twilight, and he wasn't fast enough to get a hold of or hit Ross. The stalemate then had been broken by Celestia's intervention, but that was only after the three had been trying to batter each other with everything in the room they could get a hold of. Despite how violent it had seemed, none of them had any harsher injuries than a few scuffs and a bruise or two. Since then Celestia suggested that if two of them were arguing, the third would do their best to not get involved, aside from trying to stop it from escalating no matter whose side they were on in the end. It would be easier to cool down tempers than to fund a repair bill later, or worse, a hospital bill. This far the idea had stuck. Woof. Ross stated, holding his paws up between the two. A deal? Twilight asked, looking curiously at Ross. What terms? Spike questioned, his anger fading a bit. Grrrrrr, Ross explained, causing both of them to grumble under their breath as they thought it over. Spike was the first to agree. All right, fine. 1 hour. Spike grumbled. The party's not until 3 anyway. But you have to go, no weaseling out of it, and I work only an hour. Twilight didn't seem thrilled with the deal either, though a quick glance at Ross told her it was this or nothing. The moondog had adopted his "I'm already tired of this crap" pose, his ears flat to his head and arms crossed as he stood on 2 legs to look down at both of them. Both Twilight and Spike had the same pose for when the others were fighting, but Ross was still the most physically intimidating out of the three. All right, fine. So where is the book? Twilight asked as Spike climbed up a ladder on the other side of the room. It's over here. Spike called, pulling it out and waving it in her direction. Twilight's magic wrapped around the book, yanking on it and pulling Spike off the ladder, the little drake still hanging onto the book. Ross dove for and managed to catch Spike before he hit the ground, a low growl coming from his throat as an oblivious Twilight dropped all the other books she had been holding in her magic, the pile thudding down atop the moondog and dragon. Ross whimpered from under the pile and Spike sighed, rising to begin picking up the fallen books. Elements, elements, E, 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 aha. Elements of harmony, see Mare in the Moon. Twilight stated, reaching the correct section only for a redirect. Mare in the Moon? Spike questioned as he climbed the ladder to put the books back. But that's just an old pony's tale. Twilight flipped through the pages of the book back to the MS. The Mare in the Moon, myth, from olden pony times. Twilight read. Olden pony times? Seriously, does no one know how to put a date on things? Spike complained. I mean, seriously, how hard is it to slap a date on something? I mean, it's only 1000 AL. In a couple of days anyway. A powerful pony who wanted to rule Equestria, defeated by the elements of harmony and imprisoned in the moon. Twilight continued, ignoring Spike's comment. Legend has it that on the longest day of the 1000th year, the stars will aid in her escape, and she will bring about nighttime eternal. Ross listened in, handing books up to Spike, though he froze suddenly, his ears perking up as he heard the story. Something was bothering him about it, but he couldn't figure out what. "Do you two know what this means?" Twilight gasped. No, Spike grumbled, and Ross shook his head, catching the ladder before it wobbled too much under Spike. "Take a note please, to the princess," Twilight stated as her magic started floating a quill and parchment over to Spike as he climbed down the ladder. Out of the three of them he had the best writing. Ross's was barely legible on his best days, and Twilight's was completely different depending on whether or not she was using her horn or mouth. As such, she preferred to simply dictate to Spike, not liking the taste of quills. "Okie dokie." Spike shrugged, preparing to write. "My dearest teacher, my continuing studies of pony magic have led me to discover that we are on the precipice of disaster." "Hold on," Spike muttered. "Precipice. Bark." Ross corrected Spike's spelling. "Of disaster." "Got it," Spike stated. "The mythical mare in the moon is in fact Nightmare Moon." Ross's head snapped up, looking at Twilight, his ears perked high on his head. That name was maddeningly familiar to him, and yet he couldn't place it. There was also something else, some sort of presence. He felt it as Twilight walked past the large timekeeping device as she said the name. Did saying the name summon its owner? Ross shuddered. Neither Spike nor Twilight noticed their brother's discomfort as Twilight was facing away and Spike was too focused on the writing. "And she's about to return to Equestria and bring about eternal night," Twilight continued. "Something must be done to make sure this terrible prophecy doesn't come true. I await your quick response, your faithful student Twilight Sparkle." "Got it," Spike claimed. "Great, send it," Twilight ordered. "Now?" Spike asked. "Of course. I dunno, Twilight. Princess Celestia's probably getting ready for the summer sun celebration, send it the day after tomorrow. She's got to be busy." "That's just it, Spike. The day after tomorrow is the 1000th year of the summer sun celebration, it's imperative that the princess is told right away." Spike submitted to the odd logic and rolled the scroll up, wrapping a seal around it before breathing in deeply and incinerating the scroll with a blast of green flame. "There, it's on its way." "But I wouldn't hold your breath," Spike chided. "I'm not worried, Spike, the princess trusts me. In all the years she's been my mentor, she's never once doubted me." Twilight grinned. "Except for the toothpaste incident." Spike grinned. Twilight frowned. "We promised never to speak of that again." "You promised never to speak of it." "I promised nothing." "Then there was the catastrophic book fort fire." Spike grinned. Twilight's frown deepened. "Ross. Spike's picking on me," Twilight called, looking back to her brother, who for some reason was staring into the hourglass. "Ross? What is it?" The moondog continued to stare at the upper bulb without responding. Something that made both of them worried enough to walk over to him. "Ross?" Spike questioned. "You okay?" Ross remained silent until the last grain of sand fell from the hourglass before he turned and looked at them both with a smile that would have scared any who didn't know him. "Woof!" Ross chuckled. "The hour's up?" Twilight questioned, only for her eyes to widen. "Oh come on, it wasn't that long." Spike smirked as Ross scooped up his sister and the present for Moon Dancer, walking towards the door. "Woof! But I'm waiting for a return letter. I can't just leave," Twilight protested. "Hey, I'm the one who gets the letters and I'm going to Moon Dancer's party, so if you want to read it as soon as it comes you best come on." "This is cheating," Twilight flailed as she was carried out the door. Author's note. Oh bugger, this was longer than I thought it would be. I planned to do one chapter per episode, but I'm barely out of the opening and I'm already at a ridiculous amount of words. Looks like the first episode is gonna be longer than the real episode. Ah well. We're off. End author's note. End chapter 17. Friendship is Puppies. Part 1.